Ever feel like companies are, saying one thing and doing another?
Oh, definitely.
You're not alone there. Today, we're diving deep into, well, a pretty crucial question, I think. For anyone interested in how the world works, can you even be a business owner without being a hypocrite?
It's a tough one.
Yeah. And we're going to unpack these inherent tensions between business, ethics, and the whole capitalist system. We're drawing from a really thought-provoking source one of you shared, actually. It's called Business Ethics, Navigating Capitalism's Contradictions.
And it really gets into those moments, right? The ones that make you kind of raise an eyebrow.
Exactly, like a brand talking up sustainability while their stuff is, swimming in single-use plastic.
Or the startup preaching mental health but fostering total burnout culture.
Right. Or even how sometimes corporate social responsibility initiatives can feel a bit, well, more like marketing than a real commitment.
Mm-hmm.
But what's really key and what our source highlights is that this isn't just about bad apples or individual morality. It might be woven into the fabric of capitalism itself.
The structure, yeah.
Okay, so let's dig into this.
What's fascinating right off the bat is how the source pins down the core issue. Business hypocrisy, it says. It basically boils down to a gap between the values a company says it has and how it actually operates day to day.
Okay, like what?
Well, think about a company that talks a big game about fair wages, right? Loudly proclaims it. But then behind the scenes, maybe they're fighting tooth and nail against unionization.
Ah, right. Seen that one.
Or a company marketing its amazing eco-friendly practices, but their supply chain or production methods are, well, let's just say not very green at all.
Yeah.
And the source makes this really useful distinction. It says hypocrisy can be really explicit, like deliberate greenwashing, just misleading people.
Obvious stuff.
Yeah. But it can also be more subtle, more implicit, like just kind of going along with or participating in systems that cause harm, maybe without even intending to be malicious, just complicity.
So it's not always deliberate deception.
Yeah.
It can be just being part of the system.
Exactly. And for anyone trying to, make sense of all this, seeing both those explicit and implicit forms is pretty crucial.
Totally. It's rarely black and white, is it? And this is where our source gets really interesting, I think. It dives into how the capitalist system itself kind of puts business owners in these ethically tricky spots.
A pressure, yeah.
Right. The system rewards maximizing profit, pushing for peak efficiency, which often means cutting costs, maybe cutting corners, and just relentless competition. And that naturally creates some serious moral dilemmas.
It really does.
The source has some great examples that stuck with me. Like, think about a clothing brand. They're proudly sourcing ethical cotton. Sounds great, right?
Mm-hmm. On the surface.
But then they've got to ship that cotton, maybe the finished clothes, across the world using ships and trucks burning fossil fuels. There's a contradiction right there.
Yeah, unavoidable almost.
Or, okay, a tech startup. Their whole mission is about decentralizing the internet, breaking up monopolies, noble goal. But where do they host their stuff? Almost certainly on the massive server farms run by, like, Amazon or Google.
The very giants they oppose.
Exactly. Even like your local fair trade coffee shop, they might really struggle to pay farmers a truly fair wage and keep prices affordable for customers and make sure the coffee is actually good quality. It's a constant balancing act.
So difficult.
So the big question the source throws out there is, does this unavoidable entanglement, being stuck in this system, automatically make every business owner a hypocrite?
And that leads to a really important point the source makes, how businesses respond to these tensions. It draws this valuable line between what it calls hypocrisy with awareness and action, which it sort of reframes as ethical humility.
Ethical humility.
I like that. And on the other side, performative or deliberate hypocrisy.
Okay, break that down. What's ethical humility?
So, with ethical humility, you see business owners who know about the contradictions. They're aware. They don't pretend they don't exist.
Okay.
And they actively try to minimize the harm, reduce the negative impacts of what they do. And crucially, they avoid what the source calls performative activism.
Ah, the social media stuff that doesn't really do anything.
Exactly. Those empty gestures. Patagonia gets mentioned as a key example here. They're known for being unusually open about their environmental footprint.
Yeah, they publish reports on it.
Right. And they actively, consistently work to reduce it. They don't claim they're perfect. Not at all. But you get this real sense of intention, of accountability.
So signs of that would be like transparency, admitting mistakes, actually investing in change.
Precisely. Being open to criticism, committing long-term, even if it hits the bottom line short-term, that sort of thing.
Okay, so they're not just using buzzwords, there's actual effort. But then the other side, performative or deliberate hypocrisy? What's that look like?
Right. And this is where the source gets, let's say, more critical. This is when businesses use the language of ethics, wokeness, sustainability talk, social justice slogans, but it's primarily a tactic.
A marketing ploy.
Basically, yeah, to boost profits or image, even when their actual practices completely contradict those values. The examples the source gives are pretty stark.
Like what?
Well, think oil companies running big ad campaigns about their tiny investments in green energy, while their main business is still, fossil fuels.
Classic greenwashing.
Totally.
Hmm.
Or fast fashion brands releasing these small eco-conscious lines made in the same old sweatshops.
Ah, yeah.
And what does that gives me? Startups that bang on about being employee first. We're a family.
While actively trying to crush any attempt to unionize.
Exactly that. The source argues this isn't just an oops and inconsistency. It's calculated. It's strategic. Using ethics as a tool is the hypocrisy here.
And you can probably spot that by, looking at where the money actually goes versus what the ads say, or how defensive they get.
Yeah, big gap between marketing spend and actual ethical investment is a red flag. Defensiveness, too. Absolutely.
Okay, so knowing that distinction is key.
And building on that, the source then looks at some really interesting business models. Ones that try to structure themselves differently to build ethics in from the ground up, hoping to minimize this kind of hypocrisy.
Okay, alternatives. What are they?
It highlights things like worker cooperatives. That's where the employees actually own the company and share the profits. Power is distributed.
So it tackles exploitation head-on.
Right. Then there are B corporations or B Corp. They have a legal requirement baked into their structure to consider their impact on society and the environment, not just making money for shareholders.
So it's legally binding.
It is, yeah. It forces a broader perspective. Then you have social enterprises. Their main reason for existing is usually to solve a social or environmental problem. Profits get reinvested back into that mission.
Purpose over profit, essentially.
You could put it that way. And what I found really interesting was steward ownership. This model actually separates the economic rights, who gets the profits, from the governance rights, who makes the decisions. The idea is to keep the company focused on its long-term purpose, not just maximizing short-term financial returns for outside investors.
Wow, okay. So that prevents, selling out the mission for profit later on.
That's the goal, yeah, protecting the purpose.
So these models, they're not magic bullets, right? They don't eliminate all the contradictions we talked about.
No, the source is clear on that. They still operate within the larger capitalist system. But they build in structures and incentives that make deliberate hypocrisy much less likely, or at least harder to justify internally.
Right. It changes the internal logic a bit.
Ah.
Which brings us to, I guess, a really crucial point the source makes. We need realistic expectations.
Exactly. It pushes back against this idea that we should demand, absolute moral purity from businesses, especially given the complex system they're in.
It's maybe an impossible standard.
Quite possibly. So instead, the source asks, what can we reasonably expect? And it lists a few things. Transparency is big, being honest about the compromises they do have to make.
Owning the trade-off.
Yeah. Consistency, too, genuinely trying to align what they do with what they say.
Walking the talk as much as possible.
Right. And definitely not claiming some kind of moral high ground while actually causing harm.
No halo effect allowed if your actions don't match.
Pretty much. And finally, being open. Open to feedback, open to criticism, willing to be held accountable.
Okay, so it really reframes the question for us, doesn't it? It's less about, is this business perfectly ethical, which is maybe unanswerable,
Right.
and more about, is this business trying? Are they operating consciously, responsibly? Are they actively working to minimize harm where they can?
That's the shift. Exactly. It's about the effort, the direction, the honesty.
So that initial question we started with, Can you own a business without being a hypocrite? What's the source's final take?
Well, according to this analysis, the answer is yes. It is possible.
Okay, but there's a but.
There's definitely a but. It comes with big caveats. It takes constant effort. It likely involves real sacrifices, maybe of profit, maybe of growth, and it means accepting that you probably can't escape all the contradictions.
Right, no perfection.
No perfection. The key word that comes through is integrity. But, and this is important, the source stresses integrity isn't like a switch, on or off. You have it or you don't.
It's not a destination.
Exactly. It's a practice. It's this ongoing, honest wrestling match with those tensions we've been talking about. The ethical business owner, in this view, isn't the one who magically avoids all the problems.
Because that's probably impossible.
Probably impossible. It's the one who faces them, thinks about them, and is genuinely committed to doing less harm, even within a flawed system.
Huh. Integrity as a continuous practice. I like that. It feels more achievable maybe, but also more demanding in a way.
It is demanding. It requires constant attention.
So thinking about all this, as you, listening, encounter businesses in your day-to-day life, maybe the question becomes, what will be your measure of their integrity? Not perfection, but integrity. And what does that tell us about the kind of world we actually want to build together?
That's a great question to chew on.